His bundle pacing. We can have two types of capture that is considered His bundle pacing, and then we have another type of capture, which I'll talk about. But so these two types of capture where we know we are capturing the His is called selective and non-selective. So I'm going to kind of walk through each one individually and then show a couple examples. So selective His bundle pacing is the term that we use when we have pure His or only His pacing. Another term for that is Hissian pacing. So this is going to look identical to the patient's intrinsic QRS complex. This usually occurs at lower pacing outputs. But in order to confirm this, we have to have a comparison. We have to know what the patient's intrinsic looks like. So if I'm looking at this strip right here, there's a lot to kind of look at. So I'm going to orient and walk us through what we're doing. I'm going to go through my systematic approach just to kind of help you hear what I do. And then I'll ask the team if they have any other thoughts. But this is a threshold that's being run. We have our surface lead up at the top, followed by our atrial EGM, our ventricular EGM, our markers, and then we can see our very grainy, sorry about that, threshold decrementing down. So just to kind of orient you guys, the atrial lead is a true atrial lead in the RA port, and the His lead is located in the ventricular port. So I'm going to kind of jump to the third beat here just to kind of start to explain a couple things that we're looking at, because I think it gives us the clearest image. I'm running a threshold test and I'm in a mode of VVI. When you're running a threshold test on a His lead, whether it's in the atrial port or the ventricular port, you need to run it AAI or VVI. DDD is not going to help you here. So we're running this patient VVI, and when we ventricular pace, we have this little tiny deflection on our ventricular EGM, which I'm going to give it away. Spoiler alert for this particular patient, this is the His signal. So this tiny little deflection is our His, and it matches up with our pacing spike on our surface ECG. After our His kind of starts the depolarization, we can see the remainder of our depolarization following afterwards of the rest of the ventricles, which correlates to our QRS complex. So a lot of people would look at this and say, oh no, that's not capturing, that's latency, or that's, it's too far apart from the pacing spike. No, this is what we would call latency, or, the His is now being captured and starting depolarization. So we expect to see that little bit of a prolongation there before we see our QRS complex. So every time we ventricular pace here, I see my His signal followed by ventricular depolarization up until about 2.2 right here, where I V pace. I see my signal, I see my pacing spike, but I don't see depolarization happening decently quickly after. So kind of bringing us back to the type of capture, I think I got a little excited there. Bringing us back to the type of capture, we can confirm from this strip alone that this is selective capture. Because when we're pacing, we have this specific looking QRS morphology. And when we pace down here at 2.2 and we lose capture, the patient's own intrinsic actually comes in here. And so again, you need to be able to confirm what the patient's intrinsic looks like to compare it to your pacing morphology to determine what type of capture you have. So this is selective capture or pure His capture, because we can confirm that this morphology of their intrinsic is the exact same as when we're pacing. So I think I hope that kind of helps understand pure His, where you're capturing and it's going to look exactly like the patient's intrinsic. But in order to know what that looks like, you have to know what the patient's intrinsic looks like. So I don't know, do you have any other kind of thoughts, or does there anything stick out to you on this particular strip?
I think this is a great example, Amanda. I'm really glad you went to that third beat, because that's the clearest, right? But
yeah.
Why did you do that? Because there's extra signals, right, when you have a His system. So if you had like a traditional VVI pacemaker, you're gonna see one deflection when you pace, right? And either you capture or you don't. But here with the His system, we've got like the His deflection, we got the ventricular deflection, and we have the atrial deflection. And that makes sense, right? Because the His leads in the middle of the heart, so it very likely can see the atrial channel there.
Yeah.
And not to sound like a broken record, right? But if we don't have the surface on here, if we look at where we lost capture, there is a deflection there, but it just happens to be the atrial deflection. So if you don't have a surface, you're already behind the 8 ball, but you need to be really careful that you understand what each of these deflections are, because it's more than you're used to on a normal pacemaker.
Yeah. And I think that, will lead us into a conversation later about troubleshooting if we see these signals. So selective capture, pure hiss, looks exactly like your intrinsic. That's what this patient has, until we completely lose loss of capture. The other type of oh, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just
Oh,
going to say,
no, you're good.
yeah, the only thing I say is that, and you had emphasized it earlier, the latency that you see between the pacing spike and the depolarization there. It's whether it's on the surface or whether it's on the intercardiac, it's really that patient's H to V interval and that stem to ventricular activation time, that delay. It's something that we're not going to see in where you were going is non-selective. So I'll let you keep going there. Sorry.
Perfect. So yes, good segue into non-selective there. So if selective is pure hiss, non-selective is a little bit of hiss and a little bit of myocardium capture there, myocardial tissue. So non-selective is the term that we use when we have pure hiss, but also a little bit of capture of the tissue around the hiss bundle itself. So some people, you might hear this being referred to as fusion. You might also hear it being called parahissian capture. This usually occurs at higher outputs because, it makes sense. If you're using more energy, you're more likely to capture more of the kind of the septal area around the hiss as well. So a good example here is this patient. Again, we're running a threshold test. Off to the left here, again, to orient you here, we have lead 1, we have our atrial EGM and our ventricular EGM. And our hiss lead is located in our ventricular EGM again. Off to the left, I am showing you a picture of the patient's underlying rhythm, because again, you have to know what the patient's intrinsic QRS looks like to confirm what type of capture you have. If you have patients that have complete heart block with no escape, obviously you're not going to get an intrinsic. This patient has complete heart block, which we can see at a very, they have a escape at a very slow rate, but we are able to get our intrinsic QRS complex here. So that helps me identify what's happening on this right side of the screen here. So I actually have a kind of 3 beats right off the bat. On my next strip, it's just a continuation of the same patient, where these 3 beats look different. They don't look quite like our intrinsic, but they don't look like they're completely wide QRS ventricular apex pace, right? We don't have that kind of larger, wider QRS. What I do note here is we have kind of like a slurring or a delta wave of our QRS. So this is a good indicator that you have fusion or a non-selective capture. But again, the other thing that helps me confirm it is that this is not what the patient's intrinsic looks like, and it does not look like a wide QRS. As we are decrementing energy down, as I mentioned earlier, fusion usually happens at higher outputs, and selective or pure hiss usually happens as we decrement down if we're able to get it for patients. So for this particular patient in this strip, we start with non-selective capture at higher outputs, and as we decrement down, we actually get pure hiss or selective capture, as we can see a clear morphology change. There's a couple other things that we can note. On our ventricular EGM or our hiss EGM, we start to get that deflection of the hiss signal itself. So here we can confirm we have pure hiss capture.
I think that's a great comparison between what you showed in the first one and the second one here, and you can see where you've gone to that delay between the stem and then the ventricular activation. There was a question that popped in on your previous capture threshold strip.
Sure, yeah, let me go back.
That real quickly. And the question was revolving around, why do we see a return back to morphology after the beat that you have circled? And I think it's, hiss capture or hiss threshold testing is no different than any other device capture threshold testing, is you can have intermittent loss of capture. And so it looks like we're oscillating here between lost beat and then resume capture and then a lost beat. And we're going to use the same definition for threshold here as we would with any type of, we're looking at that point where we lose consistent capture. So I think we're just oscillating here. And I just wanted to address that for the question that popped up.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, definitely. Intermittent, very feasible, happens frequently. But we, again, as Greg said, anytime we have loss of capture, whether it's intermittent or not, we're losing capture for the patient. That's not what our threshold will be.
Thank you.
Threshold is consistently capturing. Yes, thank you.